Welcome back to the Real Couchwives podcast, where we overanalyze all things Bravo. Today we're recapping Summerhouse Season 8, Episode 3.
Yeah, and this was a pretty fun episode. Carrie, how did you feel about it?
It was fun. Honestly, I'm really liking the season so far. They're finally having fun in the Summerhouse, which is awesome. But we're also really starting to see, I think, the cracks in Lindsay and Carl's relationship. Although, this time it's a little bit, more subtle than last time, where Lindsay literally accused her fiance of being on drugs, her sober fiance. But overall, I'm still really enjoying it. What about you?
Yeah, I think I'm enjoying it, and I think that the one other word that I'd associate with this episode in particular was productive. We
That's
got the
true.
whole Lindsay and Danielle kind of stuff sorted. We have the Lindsay and Carl stuff sorted, and then by
I
the end
mean,
of the
sorted,
episode,
like
sorted,
Band-Aid.
exactly, Band-Aid on. And then by the end of the episode, Gabby gets even a little bit of resolution between Lindsay and Paige. So I thought that was kind of fun and nice to get to see.
Yeah, it's true. And Kyle and Amanda's dogs are in the house, so that's always a good
Yeah,
time.
that is always a good time. All right, so the episode picks back up, back in the bedroom of Lindsay and Carl, the scene of one of the many crimes that we saw last episode. And Carl does end up going for a run. The rest of the house starts to wake up. We have a cute little scene between Jesse and West in bed together. Did you notice that?
Jesse and West?
Yeah.
I don't know if I did.
No, I just thought that was nice. I feel like yet again we're just seeing cute little moments between Jesse and West and their little bromance. So
Yeah.
we love that.
Not to be outshined
Outshine.
by Kyle and West a little bit later.
Yeah, exactly. Very much so. There's a lot of bromance happening in this house, which
cute.
we love. Yeah. Carl comes back from his run and he chats with Gabby and he explains, kind of everything that went down from his side. And just in general, I feel like Gabby, she doesn't provide a lot of storyline necessarily to the show, but she definitely feels like she does a good job of kind of being the person to listen, take in, do some behind the scenes background work.
Yeah, totally. That. Gabby's super level-headed, and I really like her, and I want to see more of her, and I want to see more of her own storyline.
Yes.
But yeah, I think she does a good job, especially when she's kind of the only girl who is really legitimate friends with Lindsay at this point. And I think she feels a lot of kind of pressure from that to yes. be there for her, but then also not ostracize herself from the other girls. She's balancing it quite well.
She is. She actually really is. And especially kind of coming in, I know that it's not her first season, but even being your second season too, it still feels like you kind of are navigating these waters. You're not really in holding your own kind of in the same way that you are when you're a little bit more of a veteran on the cast. We then have an interesting little scene between Danielle and Lindsay, because obviously Carl and Gabby have now talked about what happened the night before. So we get to see Danielle and Lindsay kind of do a little recap of what happened the night before. And as Lindsay explains it, she says, I slept in Gabby's bed and I tried to go in there this morning and I was like, you were not nice last night. And he got really defensive and was cutting me off. And I'm like, trying to tell you how I felt, and you're cutting me off, and then saying, I'm not listening to you. And then she says, I have absolute PTSD from that, Carl. And I was like, ooh, okay, Lindsay, I'm sure a lot of people have PTSD from fighting with you as well.
That's so true. How many sandwiches have you made me, Lindsay Hubbard?
Yeah, exactly.
That she's now I think that's a sign in her new house, her new share house or Airbnb
the
she
hub
made.
House in Nashville. Yeah.
Yeah. And also it's just shocking to see her recount this story and just so happened to keep out of this description how you accused Carl of being on drugs.
When you were super drunk and really wasted and far beyond.
She's literally taking the smallest bits of information from this fight to garner sympathy from Danielle and be like, oh my god, he was so defensive. It's did you ask why he was being defensive? Also, he wasn't yelling at her. Honestly, for the things that she said to him, he was very calm.
Yeah, he was, and that's just it. And the whole oh, we're not gonna have a nice weekend now thing, and just all of the little things that she was also kind of throwing out and adding into this fight. like really not accurately looking back at this at all, even though it's only been a couple of hours now between like the second fight, the morning fight, and then the retelling with Danielle.
Yeah.
um and then interestingly, in Lindsay's confessional as well, she says that she never thought that he wasn't sober, and that she like admits like, I 1,000% should have used more delicate words in that moment, but I was so taken aback by how he was treating me, and that it was like so startling because it very much was giving like old Carl vibes, and you're just like,
Yeah, that was
what?
awful.
Yeah.
That was awful. Like, so you didn't actually think that he was not sober. You just felt like he was being aggressive, which is okay, but like that's fully not what you said. Like
That's
you,
just it.
and it's not like you said it once, you said it like 3 times, and you said
Yeah.
it the next morning.
Yeah.
And she doesn't seem to really understand the severity of the words that she said
Hmm.
the whole episode long, and
Yeah.
even now when she comments on it later. Like
Yeah.
it's really not a good look.
That's just it. Like, if she had just in the, like, even in, like, I understand, like, in the moment, maybe it's hard to kind of, like, reflect back on it, but when a producer's asking you in, like, a confessional, like, especially because obviously we never really fully know exactly when the confessionals are filmed, but we have to assume that this is still filmed before the breakup has happened. Um, she's still kind of, like, retelling it, and isn't like, yeah, like, ugh, I can't believe that I got so wasted, and I can't believe that I said that, and like that really isn't what I ever would have thought. Like, I know that Carl is like so, strong in his sobriety, and he's so committed to this, and I made a stupid mistake when I was drunk. Like, that would be so respectable, instead of being like, well, no, I never actually thought that he wasn't sober, except I fully did.
It's
Or I
yeah,
acted like I did.
it's so messed up. Also, is it now? It might be later that she says this, but at one point she says to Carl that he's being like Tom Sandoval.
That's actually in the preview for next week.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
so more
But
to
I was
come on that
like,
one too.
dude, if anything, you're kind of being like Tom Sandoval right now.
You're
Like, just like,
gaslighting.
yeah, like continuing to harp on like this one narrative that is
Yeah,
nowhere near the truth of what actually happened.
yeah,
And
like the
like, well,
deflection,
maybe,
deflection, deflection.
yeah. So it's just like, dang. Yeah, okay.
I
So
know.
it's all merging
I know.
into
So from there, we have a little chat between Kyle and Carl, just to kind of, recant what happened the day before as well. Kyle talks about how he felt that it was really important for Carl to have kind of like a couple of witnesses, which obviously I think then makes all of us think about the breakup that's going to come, and the fact that it's recorded, and the
Oh,
needing of the
that's
witnesses the
true.
witnesses to see what really went down. um I think it's nice because Carl's trying to not like really put like the blame on her, and Kyle's like trying to be like, well, no, she was being next level, and like, we need to kind of like be able to isolate that she's kind of the issue in this moment, and you're trying to solve the problem, but last night she was the problem, right? Like, that's the
Yeah.
dynamic
I
that's kind of set up.
I actually really like the way that Kyle handled this. Like you
Mm.
could tell like Carl was kind of trying to like not make excuses for Lindsay, but like kind of be like, "Oh, I understand. Like, she's feeling uncomfortable in the
Mm-hmm.
house."
Mm-hmm.
And then Kyle's like, "No, like last night was absolutely not okay. Like
Yeah.
that was unacceptable." And
Mm-hmm.
he's like, "Yeah, you're right."
Yeah.
Like he needs someone to be like, "This is not cool."
Mm-hmm.
And to kind of be like, you know, the Kyle says like the way that I deal with Lindsay is I either just kind of fall on the sword because she doesn't take accountability and it's not going to end,
Mm-hmm.
or I disassociate a bit and like
Yeah.
you can't do those things and like you're going to get married soon and it's a long life of falling on the sword.
Mm-hmm. It is, and that's just it. Like, I think that I wonder how much these conversations end up being kind of like what leads also to the ultimate breakup between Carl and Lindsay, right? Like, Kyle actually showing these things to Carl and kind of like holding up this mirror and being like, no, this is not an okay way for this like dynamic to be playing out. Like, I'm sure that Carl deep down knows that it's not right, but it's also something different when your friend is then telling you like, no, this is not right.
It's true. It is also a little bit crazy that it's Kyle the one giving this
Yeah.
relationship advice, and like I feel like right before Kyle and Amanda's wedding
Yeah.
people were
To
giving them
literally,
similar
literally,
conversations,
100%.
not about the same thing, but basically being like, hey, you guys have some pretty big problems and you're
Mm-hmm.
kind of getting married soon.
Mm-hmm. you sure that this is the right move for everybody? Yeah, yeah, 100%. And I guess we're gonna see how it goes for Kyle and Amanda, and we know how it goes for Carl and Lindsay, unfortunately.
Yeah.
uh, so the group is going to. It is still Saturday, even though we've had this big blow up fight the night before. So the group's gonna do a beach day. We do get a kind of interesting scene here between like Gabby's like basically calling her sister and like telling her like what's going on. And Gabby does have like a really good take on it. She's like, Lindsay came into this house enemies with all the girls except for me, so she's trying to articulate her feelings and she feels like she's not being heard. And that should be the end of it, or it would have been the end of it until she threw some accusations that had no basis whatsoever. And it's like, okay, so we're at least, even though you are kind of like team Lindsay ultimately, it's nice that you can see that there are some flaws in her thought process.
Oh yeah, like I don't think there's anyone who looked at that
Mm-hmm.
or experienced that and
Mm-hmm.
was like, that's okay behavior.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, and it like makes me think about like what's going to happen like next year too, right? Like if they both like do they both come onto the show for season 9 to film? Like are there some gaps open in the group that will allow kind of like both of them to be there? Like I'm super curious.
I don't know. And like from what we're seeing on VPR, it's like not the way forward to force people back
Mm.
together.
Mm-hmm.
Um ultimately,
I think that
I
the
think
group's
Kyle
dynamic is
oh,
so different though. Like even like with Gabby being able to kind of like talk to both of them like after this big fight and like see both sides
it's
of it.
it's true. I think ultimately though, if one of them was going to come back, it would be Lindsay
Mm,
because she's chaotic and
yeah.
she's like, love her or hate her, she's good television.
Mm-hmm.
And I also don't think that the house is going to be that conducive to Carl, especially being
Mm,
sober, especially if he is feeling awkward. I
yeah.
don't know. Like
Yeah.
I just want him to do whatever's best for him.
Yes. Yes, 100%. I do feel like he seems more secure in his like sobriety in general, and I feel like
Totally.
less worried about him coming back into the summer house next year. I
That's
do
true.
also think that like just from like what we've seen this year of him wanting to kind of like wanting to be friends with the rest of the cast and wanting to be friends with the group and wanting to be included, I think he also is really enjoying the fact that there are two other boys in the house, and so he does have like a little bit more of like a boy squad. Like I think that does want to be, he wants to be here, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not like the vibes that we got last season where we're like, oh, neither of them want to be here, like neither of them are interested in
No,
this
you're
anymore.
so right. He totally wants to be there a lot. And you can see that. And I guess that's kind of what's making Lindsay mad is she's like, "Wait, we're not on an island alone anymore.
Yeah,
Like, why are you going out and having fun without me?"
yeah, that's true, that's true. The fact that he didn't come back, Gabby came back with her, and that's
Mhm.
the dynamic. Yeah, it's super interesting.
Interesting.
Anyways, so we go off onto the beach day. They've got a good little setup. Kyle has brought these massive speakers with them to be able to party it up on the beach, and we get a couple little like asides from like couples of the group. So the first one is between Danielle and Lindsay, and this is interesting because I feel like this feels like what Carl and Lindsay thought their plot was going to be this summer or like this season. And the plot is like, Carl finding himself, Carl finding a job, like kind of Carl's been like floundering and figuring out what he
Mhm.
wants to do with his life now that he's out of Loverboy. Um, and like the fact that they like kind of like come back to it like a couple times in the episode,
Yeah, they
I'm like,
do.
oh, this was what you guys' storyline was going to be, and now you're just trying to like backtrack and be like, whatever happened last night, that's in the past. This is our storyline this year.
Yeah. That's so true. That's a good point.
Yeah, so Lindsay, basically the TLDR is that Lindsay is kind of like over the fact that like Carl doesn't have like his stuff together and that he doesn't have like a next step career wise.
Yeah, and she's pretty condescending about it like
Yeah,
the entire episode,
yeah,
especially like the confessional when she's like, he tried like a whole bunch of things and he
hmm,
would just like get into it and we would spend all this money.
yeah,
That point is fair. I think like I've definitely seen people in life who are like really all in, like gonna really do this one thing, but then don't really like commit to it.
Yeah.
And I could see how that'd be frustrating, especially like apparently he hired like a $20,000 life coach,
Yes, for six
or
months.
at one point when they're like he was gonna start a podcast and we like
Yeah.
bought podcast equipment.
Yeah.
As people who have started their own podcast, that stuff is not cheap.
No.
Like,
And you don't need to invest too much right at the beginning. Like, you can
no,
start slow.
but I can see them having been like, hey, we're gonna buy the best mics, we're gonna
Yeah.
buy all of these
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
But then like it's more the part when she's like, yeah, you know, like Carl's still like trying to figure out like what he wants to be when he grows up, and that
Mm-hmm.
was such a rude comment.
Yeah, I know. And it's like, I'm sorry that he can't just be like an influencer like you. He can't just like get brand deals and like it's not the same. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
he can do a little bit of that, but never on the level that like a female influencer can do that. So it's kind of
it's
hard. And I'm
true.
also like, I'm sure it's really difficult to be like sitting at home and like, or like being the person that like has to like do like the 9 to 5 when your partner does like like a very like flexible kind of like influencer lifestyle. Like if she's going off to do like promotions and events and like different things, like, and that was his life a little bit when he was in Loverboy, and now he's not in that. Like if he either has the option to go back to like a 9 to 5, which like somebody in a 9 to 5, not desirable, not the one, um or he has to like find something else, and like getting that ramped up is not the easiest thing.
Mm-hmm.
um anyway, we then have a little sit down between West and Paige,
I
which
loved
basically,
this.
I know it's so cute. It's really cute too because she's like, Paige is basically just talking about how West is like fitting in so seamlessly with the group, and he says that he would have been heartbroken if that wasn't the case. Just like moment for West.
They're just so cute.
They're so
Yeah, I
cute.
really like West, and I really liked him and Paige's sit down.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I just love Paige's season. I'm
Yeah.
like, Paige is absolutely like in her, I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
era. Like she's
Yeah.
just like, she's just pure Paige coming in
Yes.
with like the great one-liners, and
Mm-hmm.
she's so sure of herself, and she's just like not really involved in the mess, but will kind
Yeah.
of come stir the like pot a little bit. I just like, I don't know. I love her. I think
Yeah.
she's so funny, and I love all of the things that she says. She nails her confessionals 100% of the time,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and you know that
100%.
stuff is real
Yeah.
because she has a podcast and she says that like just every day. Like this
Yeah.
is just the way she speaks.
Yeah, exactly. This is very much her. Yeah, and like, last year I feel like with the whole like Danielle and Lindsay thing, like she kind of got like a little bit like messy and a little bit mean girly at like
Yeah.
times in there. And it is nice that this year she's like not really having to get her like hands dirty too much, and she's just kind of like being able to like sit back and just be like, okay, I'm just here
Yeah.
vibing. Jealous. So the kind of like main thing that comes out of this is that West has decided that he is going to ask out Ciara, which is
Yeah.
super exciting. And we will get to see that a little bit later on in the episode. And then we get the really big sit down, which is obviously between Carl and Lindsay. They need to kind of address what went down the night before and kind of like figure out how they're gonna hash it together, get back into a good place. I think Carl starts off really well, like we're super strong. He's like, I really love you. I know that we both had anxiety coming into the house, and I do want to be your support. And last night, basically, I was trying to de-escalate the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Lindsay is like, yes, I understand that, but I don't know where the mood that you were having was coming from. You were being snappy, you were being aggressive, you were being rude, and I was like, whoa, what the heck? Like, what's happened? And like, is there something that like is bringing this out? Basically, is what she's saying, and that's why she kind of
Yeah.
went into the direction of like, maybe you are no longer sober, or maybe you're not sober in this moment. And so then,
Also,
oh, sorry,
oh, sorry. Just like
no, go ahead.
before we go into like the how the rest of that,
The rest of that.
it's just also crazy that like Carl was the one who had to come and like initiate this
Mm.
conversation, and he's the one
Mm-hmm.
who had to apologize first.
Mm.
Like
Yeah.
what? Like
Yeah.
that should have been Lindsay.
That's a good point. That is a good point. That is a good point. Especially because like I think last year he kind of got accused of being the one that like wanted to just like shut it down and like not have anything happen
Mm-hmm.
on camera. And like clearly like that's very much like the opposite of what this is as well, is that she's the one that's like avoiding and like he'll come to me when
Yeah.
it's
I
time.
don't know. I just feel like he didn't take as much, or I feel like the repercussions of what was said were like pretty small.
Mm-hmm.
Um and it's
Yeah.
just interesting. I
Yeah.
will probably see it continue to brew, but I feel like they squashed it quite quickly
Yeah.
anyways, which we'll see in a
Well,
second.
and we're definitely gonna see it come back up next year in the next episode as well, which is
Hmm.
interesting. Um, yeah, so basically, then Carl does admit, does address the comments that she had made the night before and how much it hurt him to kind of like hear that, and especially when he was like, "Well, I know that I'm coming from a sober place, and that you're the one that's not coming from a sober place in that moment." And this is again when Lindsay once again brings up the PTSD from old Carl, and that's the reason why she kind of like went in the direction that she was because she was having the like flashbacks from who he
Yeah,
used to be.
that was wild. She was like, I was seeing old Carl and I was
Yeah.
just like grasping at straws and I was like going in every direction to try to figure out where it was coming from. And it's
Yeah.
like, what? Wait, what?
Hmm.
Like,
I know. I
that
know.
doesn't excuse it at all.
No, I
Like,
know.
why didn't you just say that?
I can't believe it. And then I'm also like so annoyed or like frustrated or whatever because like Carl responds to that and he's like, "Yeah, I'm scared of old Carl too." And it's like, oh, so she just gets a free pass on saying that because she pulls out like, "I have PTSD from old Carl." Like, there's no.
It's so bad. And it's also like, I feel like that comment from him actually made it even worse because it's like, what she's accusing of him of is literally probably his like biggest fear. Like
Is,
that
yeah,
is so scary to
relapsing.
him. He's like, I don't
Totally.
want to go back to being old Carl. And
Hmm.
she's saying that like she's just throwing that in his face. Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just it's not something to be taken lightly. And like
Mm-mm.
she could have been like, you're being mean to me and you're acting the way that old Carl used to act. That even would
Yeah,
be better
that
than
would be better.
talk to me when you're sober.
Yeah,
Like
exactly. What do you mean by right now?
yeah,
Tell me the
like
definition of the words right now.
I'm just not buying it. Like, what do you
Yeah.
mean? She's like, that was like such a BS excuse for saying those things.
Yeah.
And I'm so surprised that he was just like, yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just he's like, this is our last summer kind of being in this situation. Like we don't know next year if we're gonna be married and we're gonna have kids and what the situation is gonna be like. So let's put as much energy as we can to having a really good summer. And it's just like, okay, band-aid is on. Everything's fine here, nothing to see, folks. Like,
Yeah, I mean,
that's
he
it.
also doesn't like confrontation, but like, if there was a time for confrontation, it would be now.
Yeah, now
Like,
would be the moment, unfortunately. um Anyways, so that's kind of the beach day in a gist. The kind of interesting thing that happens in this evening is that the half of the group goes out for dinner and the other half stays behind, which I think is kind of
mm-hmm.
like genius.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not a huge amount kind of comes out from like the group that does go out for dinner, interestingly. um they obviously we've got like a little bit of like the stuff between West and Ciara, but I feel like the main work that happens is like back at the house. We have the sit down between Paige, Lindsay, and Gabby to kind of address the issues that Paige has with Lindsay and vice versa. And yeah, any initial thoughts about this scene?
Oh, okay. So the girls are chatting.
Yeah.
This is when we get a new revelation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, because basically Paige is saying the reason that she is upset with Lindsay is because she leaked a story, or she thinks that her and Carl
Yeah.
leaked a story that Craig got kicked out of Kyle and Amanda's wedding last
Mm-hmm.
year, or
Yeah.
2 years
2 years
ago.
ago. Yeah.
Yeah. And like right off the bat, Lindsay goes, "That was Danielle."
Yeah.
Just throws her right under the bus there.
Yeah.
Just goes, "Goodbye."
Just repaired my friendship with Danielle, started to confide in her about my issues with Carl just in time to be able to use her as a patsy for me now bridging the gap with Paige. Like,
I think that Danielle and Lindsay's friendship is going to be tested as they watch back this season,
I am
because
curious. I am
like there's
curious.
this, maybe
Yeah.
it'll probably come out, so I imagine this isn't like blindsiding.
Mm-hmm.
But I did see on Watch What Happens Live, like Danielle was on last episode
Yeah.
and she was asked about like how she feels about like what the way Lindsay was acting towards Carl and the accusations, and she said
Mm-hmm.
she was pretty shocked, and like
Mm-hmm.
that wasn't the
Version of events.
recap that she had
Yeah.
gotten.
Yeah.
And I think she's going to see things a little differently, and I wonder if she'll feel some sort of way about being so ride or die for Lindsay and cutting
Yeah.
out Carl
Yeah.
seemingly.
I know. That's just it. And if she doesn't, I wonder how I'll also feel about Danielle. Like,
Totally. Like I get
mm,
girl power and stuff, but like you're friends with Carl too, and Lindsay literally tried to trash his name, and knowing all of
mhm.
these things now get me so riled up.
Yeah, I know. I'm so upset by it. Yeah, well, and the nice thing about like two things that kind of come out of this conversation is that obviously Paige is like, okay, I know who Lindsay is. I'm not shocked that she's kind of like thrown Danielle under the bus. I'm not going to go and confront Danielle or be like, okay, is it true? Like, whatever. Like, she's just going to kind of be like, okay, we can shake hands. We can decide to be civil to one another. We can try to bridge this gap and like become friends again or whatever. Um, so I appreciate that Paige is like smart enough to kind of like see through what Lindsay's
Yeah.
done here. But it does make me also then wonder, like, as Gabby as like Lindsay's friend, kind of like seeing Lindsay throw Danielle under that bus, like how do you receive that too, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, that's
Yeah,
just how this person that's my
totally.
friend operates. Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
Hope I
No,
don't do
I mean,
anything that ever, yeah.
it makes me also think to like the whole kind of like publicity stunts that like Lindsay's been putting on like
Mm-hmm.
post
Mm,
breakup, and I
yeah.
wonder if she's just like doing all that groundwork knowing what's gonna happen. She's like,
Yeah.
well, might as well catch in on this now.
Gotta be friends with these guys. Well, that's just it. Like, cause like Danielle and Gabby were just in Nashville for like the opening of the Hub House house,
Oh,
the
true.
Airbnb, right? So they are definitely getting in a lot of those moments. They were, I'm pretty sure both of them were at the trip to Bermuda or the
Oh
Bahamas,
yeah, the
like
bachelorette
the
party
bachelorette
there.
party thing that they were
Or
supposed to go on.
yeah.
Yeah, so
Very interesting.
very interesting. The rest of the group kind of then goes and joins the other part of the group that's already out.
Oh wait, but
Uh,
first Kyle loses the dog.
oh yeah, I mean, I have to admit, I thought it was like a small moment, but it's true. If it's pretty rich coming from Kyle.
The part that I thought was funny about this, and
Yeah,
not funny that he loses a dog. I know that Tara. Oh, and actually, I don't know that Tara because I would not lose my dog first off. But like, I can imagine if you
it
were in that
happens. It
scenario.
happens. Yeah,
Um, but I just loved. I just wanted to point it out because I loved what Paige said when she's like, "You're here saying that Amanda's not ready for kids. I
yeah.
think the person who's not ready for kids is the one who just lost theirs out of the front door." Like,
That is true. That was a good page moment. I actually have to admit, I completely missed that.
oh, it
Uh,
stuck out to me. I just thought it was
yeah,
so funny.
that's good.
Dogs are okay. No cause for harm. But I'm
All
sure
dogs are
Amanda was so
safe,
pissed when she watched that back.
right? Oh my
Because literally,
god.
it's like you are staying home to watch the
Yeah,
dogs.
that is your job. That is your one job. And I get that it's hard when you're in a house that's big, that it is that big, and you have that many people opening and closing doors, but still,
Yeah.
not great. Not great. But yeah, so the rest of the group then joins that part of the group that was already out at out they go like out to like a club or something, which looks fun. Paige obviously stays home, and Amanda and Ciara are of course the first two to also get home.
hmm
Um, and yeah, I think that's kind of the weekend, which
Yeah.
was pretty good, honestly. Like, I
Yeah.
think a good little wrap up, especially because we'd already had like a pretty intense episode the episode before, and it looks like we're going to get a pretty intense episode in the next episode.
True.
But we then do have the group back in the city, and I think the best thing that obviously happens here is that we do see Ciara and Wes go on a little date.
Yeah, gosh, Ciara gets out of the car and like she is just the epitome of a supermodel. Like
I
it's just
know,
like
like, what?
what?
Yeah,
Yeah,
literally.
like no one could wear that and look good
Yeah,
except for
like
Ciara.
literally, like literally, if you're a Victoria's Secret model, like, okay, sure.
Yeah,
um
which she is. So,
yeah,
you know.
exactly. Casual. So the kind of interesting thing that I took away from this date is it's actually more than anything, it's just that it's interesting that we are finally getting more of a Ciara storyline. Like,
Yes.
Wes coming into this house is the best thing that could have happened to Ciara, because we've
Yeah,
never
it's
gotten so
opening
much
her up so
information about
much.
her. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
It's so true. It's so true. And like I feel like she like yeah, I see that she says that she like camps and she hikes
Hmm.
and she like
Yeah.
does all these outdoorsy things.
Yeah, she was in
Um
Girl Scouts for like what was it, K to 12 or something? Like, she was like basically her
yeah.
entire life.
Yeah. I no, I love that. Even actually like back at the beach there was like such a small snippet
Hmm.
But like you saw her and Danielle dancing, like having a
Yeah,
dance off,
that
and
was
she's just being
cute.
so silly and funny. And
Yeah.
it's like I feel like we haven't gotten that out of Ciara in a
Mm-mm.
long time. So
No.
I think it's both West, but also I think she's just becoming more comfortable on the show
Mm.
probably.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think she's so much sillier than we thought that she was, and I'm loving
Yeah. I know.
it.
I'm really enjoying it. And we also find out that she exclusively dates people in their mid 30s. And she's like, well, that hasn't been working for me, which is like very true because this is the whole Austin thing all over again.
There's so many Austin digs throughout these episodes. It's so good.
But so she's trying Wes out instead, and he's 28. So that's probably, I think it's a little bit closer in age to her too, because I feel like she's like also around 28.
Yeah, she's
She's
definitely
not, she's
younger
not in her 30s.
than the rest of them.
Yeah.
I also okay, I really want them to work and I love them, but like I just don't know if I get more brother sister vibes off them.
Hmm. I okay, I could definitely see that. I want them at least to be like a fun summer fling. Like I think that this is like
Yes.
the perfect level for both of them. They can just kind of like enjoy each other's company and like have us enjoy their company too.
Yeah, and I love their banter. Like their
Yeah.
banter is so cute.
Hmm.
And it's true like West is he's funny, but he's also nice and
Yeah.
like yeah, I get it. I understand it for her.
I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it. And then we do close on a little city scene between Carl and Lindsay. So Carl gets Lindsay to come meet him at like a sober bar, which is pretty cool, and obviously very much feels like a thing that would exist in New York City.
Mhm.
And once again, we revisit the conversation about Carl's career and what it's going to look like. And Lindsay basically says, I'm really attracted to like drive and determination, and I'm not seeing that here. And then he throws out
I
an
think that's
idea.
fair though. Like I think it's a fair thing to say.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I understand that there are people that are attracted to drive and determination, but I feel like that's a weird thing to kind of be like bringing up when you know that your partner in this moment has no drive and determination.
That's true. And it's also just like because like the reason I'm saying that is that we watched him last season literally take
Mhm.
like 3 weeks to write Kyle an email to say
Yeah,
that he wasn't happy
yeah,
doing what he was doing.
yeah,
But Lindsay also was totally fine with him at that point.
yeah.
He's oh my god, it's such a mean thing to say, and I don't want to say it, but like she does seem to have less problems with Carl when other people have problems with Carl, and she is
Mhm.
like his oasis.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. But we have like in general, like I don't think Carl is a big like he's not that entrepreneurial spirit that like Kyle or somebody has. Like that kind of feels like that's what she wants. And Carl, like the entire time that we've watched him on this show, has gone from like being like a dentist salesman or whatever for
Oh
like
yeah.
teeth products, like not being able to meet his like sale goals for those. Like he was kind of like struggling, and he's always kind of like not really had a thing. Like they've just put sales/business development under his like title card like this entire time because they're just kind of like, I don't know, he does like sales or something like this. There's just
Right, it's
no.
true. He like didn't he even get fired one of his first
He
few
did,
seasons.
yeah. I don't
Yeah.
know if it was the first season or if it was the second season, but it
It's
was very
true. It's
much
like at
like
this point this is not a new character thing. Like you've
mm-mm.
known this.
Yeah. And like he's just not a person that like his entire life needs to be his job, and that's
Yeah,
okay
and that's
too.
also very fair.
Yeah.
But this scene was actually super frustrating for me. I
Hmm.
think it was very telling.
Hmm.
Um because basically Lindsay is like being like, yeah, like you need to make a decision. And then he tells her an idea and she's like, no.
No, never mind. Veto it. Bad, 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 bad. Not the one. Not gonna happen. And she vetoes it by saying, so basically he says that he wants to open up a sober sports bar, which like if it was gonna exist anywhere, it could exist in New York City. So that's totally
And
fair.
also he's obviously very passionate about that and that
Yeah.
would fit with what he wants. Like
Hmm.
obviously I can't imagine how difficult that would be, which is probably
Yeah.
what Lindsay's point's trying to be. But
Yeah.
like you can't both be pushing your partner
Yeah.
to decide what they want to do and then
Yeah.
also just like immediately dismiss,
Yeah.
veto,
Like, oh, never
no, you're
mind.
not doing that. The
Yeah.
end.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, like, too, like, I think when she vetoes it, she's like, I've worked in like hospitality my entire life. I've done PR for like lounges and clubs and bars, and I think he was like, yeah, I see that as an advantage. He doesn't like get those words out, but I think that that's where he was going, is like, I see that as an advantage because you do know that world and you do know how to do that promotion and that like the word of mouth, the things that need to happen in order to make a restaurant successful. And she's like, because I know how hard it is, it's not going to happen. Like, you can't do it.
And
Not happening here.
it's just so I feel like it's just so telling of their relationship
Mm-hmm.
that she does probably kind of dismiss and shut down a lot of conversations that they
Yeah.
have, which is especially hard because he struggles to, I feel like, share his feelings in the
Yeah.
first part. And
Yeah.
it's like, I think it's fair to have worries about anyone going into a kind of volatile industry,
Mm-hmm.
but that is so not the way to do it. You should be like, wow, that's like, I'm so happy like that you are like carving out this path and figuring out what works for you.
Yeah.
I do have concerns,
Yeah.
XYZ, not just no.
Yeah. Exactly. I'm gonna veto that immediately. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And that's just it. Like, there's ways to go about like opening up a restaurant that like, or a bar or whatever it's gonna be, that can mitigate some of those risks, right? Like, you can be like, okay, well then you need to put together a business plan and you need to get investors, and like, hey, you happen to work with somebody that is in the alcohol industry, like maybe you guys can like figure something out, like Loverboy bar, sports bar or whatever. Like, who knows, right? Like, but there's things that you could like have conversations and you could like at least humor it and kind of like start to like pick at it and whatever. And instead it's just like, no, that's not gonna happen, that's not the one. Try again.
Yeah. And how crazy was it on the same episode where she is getting mad at him for
Yeah.
dismissing her feelings?
Yeah, exactly. How dare he?
The lack of accountability is just wild.
It
And I'm
is.
just like, I'm very curious to see how Lindsay responds to the reaction she's going to
Mm,
get this season.
mm. Yeah, I'm also just so curious to see how the rest of the season plays out. I really wish that these episodes came out more than once a week. Like, I can't wait for next
It's
episode.
just so crazy, like, and even like I'm thinking back to her interview with Chicks in the Office, and she's like, oh,
Mm,
things only fell apart for the like at the very end of the summer,
yeah,
and like I was blindsided up until then.
yeah.
And it's like, girl, we are seeing these issues from episode 1.
Yeah, we know. We see them. Yeah. Well, and did you see Carl was on, because he's with Kyle promoting like the non-alcoholic versions of Loverboy now, which is like,
And I
that's
love that.
genius. This is exactly
Yeah.
where this needed to go. And they were promoting it. I think he was on like an Us Weekly or something interview, and he said that he slept in the guest room for the 4 days before the breakup. And he's like, I don't know
Wow.
how she was blindsided. I was sleeping in the guest room for 4 days before we broke up. It's like,
Yeah.
blindsided.
Yeah.
I had no
It
idea.
just makes me so frustrated.
Yeah. Anyways, so that's the episode. It was a good one.
It
Next week's
was.
gonna
It
be even
was.
better.
We have 3 good episodes. Thank
Hmm.
goodness, because VPR is on the
Yeah.
opposite end
Mm-mm.
of that spectrum.
Not the one.